All right, yo, everybody. Here is another episode of the Mind Body Marathon. And today's show is about Awareness Month, which is the month of April. And I'm your host, Dr. Leo Kormanik. And it's my wife, beautiful wife, Samua. And we're going to talk a lot about our journey, mainly Samua and Naomi's journey with autism. Uh, Samua has a 18-year-old daughter who is named Naomi, and we'll actually bring her on later on the show. And she's
That would be
autistic.
fun.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. So we'll get a firsthand experience of having a
We certainly have no idea
a
what will
bundle of
happen.
joy on the episode. um, but this is a really important topic for me personally because I've not, when I was growing up, I really was never, I mean, I'd heard the word autism and never really was around autistic people. And I feel like in school, the special ed room um, was sort of separated quite a bit from the regular students and never
See, I
really,
had a different
never really
experience.
got too much of an experience around a lot of special ed kids. And I'd already heard of autistic kids, but I literally was never really around one until I met Naomi. And so my journey was really fresh with her, and so I was quite brought into the light with that.
Yeah, I think for me, I grew up in Massachusetts, and we've talked a million times how Massachusetts, Boston schools are amazing compared to Ohio. Just kidding. Not. But anyways, I do remember being a kid, and maybe because I originally came, from Brazil, didn't speak English, and so I was pulled out from classes for the first 2 years to do English as an ESL kind of situation. So maybe I was just a little bit more aware of it. But I do definitely remember, and we moved around a lot up until I hit fourth grade. So at all the different schools, I definitely remember like the little cluster of kids that were the special needs resource kids. They would call them like the resource room. But the group was always very small. It was like 3, 4
Yeah,
kids. Definitely most of them were Down syndrome that you could tell, there'd be 1 or 2 that you couldn't visually see what the problem was, but you could certainly, tell from their behavior. But they were definitely there. But like I said, it was probably never more than like 2, 3, maybe 4 students per school, including even when I was in high school. So, but yeah, Autism Awareness Month definitely brings up lots of mixed emotions and opinions for me. That's for sure.
yeah. My first real experience with Naomi was the one that like stands out as like, and I was like, oh, this is definitely a very unique behavior. Was the very first Christmas I spent with you guys, and leading up to Christmas for those first couple months, um, she was asking about, getting a Jaguar. She just kept asking about a Jaguar and Jaguar. And how old was she then? Probably 10, I would imagine. She was probably about 10
Um,
years old.
Older than that.
No, she was about 10.
About no, 11, 12, 11-ish.
Okay. And so, anyways, Christmas Day comes and she opens her first gift, and it's not an actual Jaguar, which is what she was anticipating. And so she threw a
Christmas was
fit.
done.
So Christmas was done. I mean, it was just like, and I was just like, oh my gosh, she literally wanted a Jaguar. Like, it would eat our faces off instantly. But that's just, there, Naomi just lives in her own world. And the great thing about her is that she listens and she'll do what you tell her like 90-ish percent of the time. But she really is just always so happy and so excited. And she's just such a unique person. But one of the things that we're going to sort of flesh out today is like, Naomi's journey and Sama's journey with Naomi, but also like, what are some things that we do in our household? And this is why this is important to me. And this is why we're having an episode on this, because the mind body marathon concept of how we can all sort of integrate better lifestyle choices in our household to make people on the spectrum operate better and just function better. And
Yeah,
so,
I think one of the things that keeps happening to me a lot now that Naomi is 18, and if you follow us on social media, and Naomi has her own Instagram, which is super fun. She does all her own posts, and you would think like, and I hear this a lot, like you're so lucky, from other parents with kids with autism, because unfortunately, most of the people that we know around us, including people whose kids were diagnosed, or I met them um, right around the same age when Naomi was going through. the worst of her development. And they were better off than Naomi at that point, a lot of them.
Like
And
better off like farther, like milestones, farther into the
yeah, like
milestones,
just their behaviors and, like for example, when Naomi was first diagnosed,
which was when.
it was June 2nd of 2010. And so she was 3.5 and she regressed into autism. So I had an older child already. I had Isaac and I could compare them. And Naomi's milestones, like she was hitting all these milestones younger than Isaac. She actually started talking significantly younger than Isaac and could put together 2-3 word phrases. She started to be interested in going to the bathroom. And I thought like, oh, this is going to be great. She's going to be potty trained before she's 2, all these different things. And I had another child besides having kids around me all the time growing up anyways, but she had her actual brother that was constantly comparing. And then right around her second birthday is when like I started to notice probably like that fall, her tantrums were just different. Like it was just a different situation than, a couple of months before. Um, but then she just started to I started to notice in my head, I would say so much more often, like Naomi's in her own little world. I used to have all these play dates that would have like 7, 8 moms and 10, 15 kids were at my house and Naomi would always be in the middle of it. I have pictures. Of her like crawling underneath tables, like trying to keep up with the older kids and very much engaged and looking right at my camera, which she probably didn't do again from like the age of like 2 until probably like 13, 14.
Yeah.
I have all these pictures of her before her 1.5 year, 18-month-old, mark or so. But then at her second birthday is where, because of course nobody was really listening to me. I had gone to the pediatrician, but I'm like, this is a different kid. This is a different kid. Like something is just different. And then at her second birthday, I had another big party, Brazilian style, and pretty much all the same people that were there for her first birthday were there for her second birthday. And I just remember her first birthday, like she was so cute and mingling and playing, and she was all about eating her cake and opening her gifts. And I remember when we started to sing happy birthday for her, she got kind of shy and coy and like, but totally was like taking in the attention. And then her second birthday, she sat in front of a muted TV watching Diego with like 30 kids running around my house screaming and as if nobody was there. I mean, might as well not have had anybody there. And didn't care about opening her cake, she wouldn't even participate when we were trying to sing happy birthday to her, didn't open a single gift. And she wouldn't do any of that again until she was about 5. But I remember her first ever like autism community thing was I had found she had been diagnosed not even a month. And I just like rammed into trying to find things for her and to help her and had quickly learned about early intervention and how important that
Yeah.
was. And so I found this summer camp through Kids Link and it was being held at this church. And I go to, and it was this autism specific thing. And so I go to drop her off and the whole instruction, and they had gone over all this stuff with us was, you drop them off, they get them out of your car, you come to pick them up and they will just bring her to the car for you. And I go to pick her up and somebody comes up to me without Naomi and was like, would you mind parking your car? And I just remember for a second, like sitting there, like everything in me to not just fall apart crying. Cause I'm like, why? Like something is clearly wrong. How can my kid be? And at this point, and I didn't realize some of this stuff back then, but like I had already felt so rejected and alone because I had all these like friends and different people that had like, literally 2 months before her diagnosis would hang out with Naomi or babysit her, or like have her overnight. And all of a sudden everybody was just like, oh, we can't, not
Yeah.
Naomi. And so I was really struggling with that. And in the middle of being in, an unhealthy marriage and just no support there. So it just felt like a rejection of me and my kid. And it was just so difficult. And I remember sitting in my car, like, just like if I open my mouth right now, like I'm going to fall apart. But and unfortunately that's how, I don't want to say how bad, but that's how severe her issues were.
Yeah.
Because like here we are in this autism camp and she still couldn't function well. And they were willing to have her, but they couldn't have her participate in the way the camp was meant to. And that's what they wanted to talk to me about. Like, we'll still have her and we'll work with her, but it's going to be this totally different setup for her because she's not at a place to be able to participate the way that this camp is set up for. And I was like, whatever she needs, let's just do that. And so they paired her with this provider, Amanda, and she had just graduated with like BCBA or like special needs stuff. She wanted to go into her master's program for her BCBA, which meant she had to be working in the field and all this stuff. And so she worked with Naomi for summer camp. And I remember, and Amanda didn't tell me this until 2.5 years later. And if Amanda's listening, love her to death. She was so crucial in Naomi's journey for sure. And we're still good friends and love to connect with her. But I remember about 2.5 years in, she's like, I can tell you this now because I know, like, I love you and I love Naomi. But she's like, I was dying to get a job because I needed it not only for the money, she just graduated, but she needed it to be able to continue her journey in school. And she's like, they came up to me to offer me a job. And I remember sitting there being like, please, anybody but Naomi, like any kid but Naomi. And of course it was Naomi. So that's how severe we started our journey, and so to me, I kind of understand the sentiment of some of the parents that now are telling me how lucky we are, but it's like, no, it's not luck.
Yeah, it's crazy because, and this is one of the problems with social media, is that when you go to somebody's Instagram or Facebook and you're like, see all the happy things and you're like, oh, wow, that's awesome. Their life is amazing. And it's like, if you go to Naomi's Instagram or Samua's and you're like, and look at anything that she posts about Naomi, it's like, yeah, it is a lot roses. And it is a lot of like dance competitions and cheer competitions and Naomi going clubbing in Mexico and for her 18th birthday and all sorts of like cool things that she's been able to do. But it's like, oh my goodness, the daily battles to get to those points. And it's just like, it is genuinely not luck. But what's amazing about watching you and hearing about other people's experience with autism is that the kids just sort of become, in a lot of families, just a little bit of an anchor in holding people back, and they just get them on devices and then they just kind of put them in the corner and then they just kind of let them be, and then hopefully they don't ruin the day too much. And on your end, you're more interested in getting her integrated and living more of a quote unquote normal life. And I mean, Naomi has a job now. I mean, she works at Outback and she works more than the other kids and the
She's
other
the
four
only
kids.
one that
She's the only
works.
kid that works right now. And it's like, and she has an extremely social life and it's pretty awesome. But it is wild the amount of daily conversations and preppings and school work and everything that has to go into helping her get to that level. But I think that if anybody knows has any family members or, has any friends that has an autistic kid or something, like this is a great episode to pass along because you'll sort of get a glimpse into what we do on a day-to-day basis to get her to that level.
I think, it's funny, like you go through life and you're always go, 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 and you don't always stop and reflect why things might have happened. And I don't remember what it was, but just like a month or two ago, this came up and I was telling you this story where, um, you know, nobody expects to have a child with special needs, whether it's a medical special need or something like this with autism. And there's no book in raising kids. I mean, there's a lot of books out there in raising kids, but quite honestly, like none of them you can really just follow.
Yeah.
And especially when it comes to kids with special needs. So you just you don't know, you're not prepared for it, you don't know what to do. But I remember like this just came to mind. And I don't know if what happened subconsciously for me back in 2010, but like a month or two ago, this came to my mind for some reason. But I remember being in 4th grade and we read the Helen Keller book. And um, and then we watched the movie and it was just like old school, crappy,
Yeah.
cinematography kind of movie. But there's just this scene. And if you've heard Helen Keller's story, and I don't know who, we read it in 4th grade because we had to, like, who remembers these stories? But for whatever reason, this like stuck with me.
Yeah.
And clearly the reason was because down the road I would have Naomi.
Some premonition.
But I definitely remember the scene so vividly where her tutor is trying to get her, and that was like, and maybe a little bit of because of me again learning a second language at this point in 4th grade. I still had a little bit of an accent, even though I totally understood English and all of that. But it just really, like, I'm like, how can you teach a deaf and blind child to like talk? Like, how would they know what the sounds are? They can't even see the letters. They can't. It's like, how do you even get the brain to process that? Like, they can't do either thing. But I just remember the scene with her learning to say water. And her nurse/tutor teacher, whose name I don't even remember from the book, which I should, But she was just so adamant. Like everybody else kind of just wanted to pacify Helen Keller along, like what you're saying, like, let's just make this, have this kid just somewhat live a life. But her teacher was just so passionate, adamant that no, like she can learn this. Like she's not limited by her blindness and her deafness. And I am going to get this kid to do something, like to understand this. And there's a scene where she's trying to get her to say water and she gets frustrated. And Helen probably, when you see the acting, might have had even a touch of autism based on some of her behaviors, the way that they played the scene, at least, or the character. But she like drags her out to the yard and starts like pumping the water. And it almost looks like abusive in some ways,
yeah.
and she's just very aggressive, like sticking her hand under the water and just pumping and pumping. And Helen's like freaking out and borderline crying. And then all of a sudden she just pauses as she's feeling the water. And then she says, wah, wah. And I guess like that just subconsciously was ingrained in my mind. And like literally like the second that I left, I knew Naomi was going to get the diagnosis she was going to get. I was shocked from everything I kept hearing that it happened at this first appointment. I had expected all these other evaluations to take place, but later I come to find out that the speech therapist she had been seeing for almost a year was actually on Rainbow's, Hospital Rainbow's like autism panel. So I'm sure a lot of her notes came into play. But I literally left that appointment and went to the library and just like checked off all these things. And, thankfully the internet already existed and was functioning well. And so there's a lot more resources today than back then. And I just was like, I'm figuring this out. Like, this is not going to define my child. And I think this, forced reading book in fourth grade probably subconsciously drove that.
What are the things that, what are the hallmark, what are some of the, so again, we're going to have Naomi on at the end of the episode here. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But what are some of the hallmark characteristics of autism?
So, I haven't kept up with some of the recent diagnosis change and definitions, but for Naomi, definitely in general for a lot of the autistic kids, and Naomi regressing, she lost her speech. So a lot of autistic kids, don't speak or are very limited. For sure, their communication, like intake, is a lot more difficult too, and non-tangible concepts, like even for Naomi now, like permanence, like the concept of something being like when you make a decision, you can't just decide I'm going to quit my job today, but then next week when you feel good, you want to go back to work and make your money. The sense of that permanence. But they tend to obviously be antisocial. There's just overstimulation. Some kids can seek stimulation, so that's where you're going to see a lot of the head banging and the spinning. They want compression. And then other kids, it can go the opposite way, where they're too easily stimulated and they can't, have lights on their face and loud noises and, tags on their clothes, or specific, like they can only wear like one specific brand of clothing that doesn't have the seams a particular way. Like some kids can't wear socks because like literally like the stitching of their clothes will bother them. So it can go either way there. Definitely behavioral issues. A lot of them, they're just impulsive. They can't control their behavior. They tend to easily and that's where I think a lot of it was misunderstood in the beginning, because for a lot of these kids, their bodies are just like, it's just hurting for different reasons. And so, like imagine if you just walked around with your stomach feeling like it's being wrung through, one of those old school like washer wringer thingies, like you'd be screaming your head off too, because you can't even say like, this is what's happening, or you don't know. So those would be, with Naomi, some of the interesting things that I noticed was, her tantrums, like I said, they just seemed different. She lost her speech, so that was a big deal. But then her tantrums, like it wouldn't matter what the reason for her tantrum was. They would be like so blown out of proportion every single time, which was not how she used to behave. And then also, even if you attempted to be like, here's what you want, or like, fine, just have this, like even now with Mariah, we have a 3.5-year-old. Like if she's throwing a tantrum over, I want you to give me this, meat stick, and we're not giving her the meat stick, she'll just tantrum. But if you give her the meat stick, she'll stop. Like, okay, thank you for giving me what I want. And with Naomi, it wasn't that way. It's because their adrenals and like the cycle for their fight or flight, once it gets turned on, their body can't turn it off. And it has to go through the whole cycle to be able to just reset itself. And so it wouldn't matter if you gave her the stuff. Her tantrums would last a half hour, 45 minutes over whatever. And then she stopped making eye contact. That was another big thing. And then she used to move her fingers in a really weird way all the time. And for some reason, that really stuck out to me as well as like one of the things.
Yeah, she also, other things like, um, has very little empathy, can't take a joke, subtle
Which
things
she's
like that.
gotten better
She's
at
gotten better,
that.
but these are like, just the higher end social cues.
Yeah.
She's just not like, she doesn't know if she's being made fun of. She is getting better at this, obviously, but so you can, she doesn't know if somebody's like, so she could wear a weird outfit and people are like laughing at her and it's like, she doesn't even know. It doesn't even like affect her. Um, and then so like these are some of the things that I noticed immediately is that she really is just in her own world. And um, she's always perseverating, right? So she's always
Yeah.
doing that, which is like recalling sort of episodes she's seen or like scenes from cartoons
She
or
scripts a lot,
scripts.
which is when what Leo was saying, like she in her head by herself. She also will just like be sitting there and all of a sudden she just starts cracking up. And I'm always like, Nate, can you tell me what it is? Because I want to laugh
And
too.
she actually doesn't even really know what it is. She's just
Yeah.
like, it's funny.
And she uses the scripts a lot. Sometimes when she is agitated and stimulated, both negatively or positively, it doesn't have to be that she's just like upset. Even when she's like really excited or happy about something, but she'll use the scripts to kind of talk about what is happening. Like when she gets mad at me, there's an episode from a TV show, and so she'll refer to me as the mayor. Because the mayor's the bad guy in this TV show that's like bossing people around. And so when I'm trying to like get her to do something she doesn't want to do, she'll be like, okay, mayor. And then she scripts like parts of the script about that. And it's interesting, like you said, even all these years that I'm always looking for the next thing. Like we reach a milestone or we get over a hurdle that I've been working with her. And then we add a new, like, okay,
Yeah.
what's the next thing that somebody typical would be able to do that she's not able to, that I can help her get there, which recently was the job situation, which we're still getting under control. But the other day, she like blatantly lied to me. Like she's recently, because we're always tweaking some of her supplements and diets and different therapy stuff, adding new, trying to get her to get to the next level of functioning and ability. And so probably in the last couple of years or so, she
Yeah.
started to like notice a little bit more. Like I remember we were at the zoo for Asian lights, and she always has her Asian festival because she's really into that culture. And this little girl, like 9, 10 years old, was looking at her and she's like, what are you looking at? Like she started to
Yeah.
notice things like that.
That would not be a thing before.
No, but the other day, like, so she started to like maybe omit things. Like she just wouldn't, like she knew enough to not tell you something. But like the other day, she blatantly lied to me, like made up circumstances, like made up. And I remember at the end of it, sitting there in our kitchen and being like, oh, I don't know if I'm really pissed off at her right now or super proud.
Yeah. So, okay. So now let's start to kind of work into some of the things that we have done, mainly you to start, and then we sort of jumped in the picture later with things. But how have you modified your lifestyle to improve her behavior?
So, when she was first diagnosed, I just, like I said, jumped into things. And again, one of those amazing, you know, divine intervention things kind of thing. I came across the National Autism Association. And at the time, they used to do these conferences. And it seemed, like safe enough because there was all that drama going on at the time with the Dan doctors and other things that were happening in the media that around the autism community.
Dan doctors?
Yeah, it was Defeat Autism Now. And unfortunately, not the right spokesperson in the right environment kind of exposed some ideas of theirs, and it just was misrepresented and taken out of context. And so they in the media jumped all over it to kind of be like, these are quack docs, and they're putting leeches and snakes on kids, which they weren't. So don't go see them. And so having a pre-med background, I was comfortable in that environment. I'm comfortable in the dialogue and all of that happening in that community. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to do those things because those doctors are clearly crazy going just off of what I was reading in the media. But I had read a book that highly recommended, like, go to a conference, be around these people,
Mhm.
hear certain things. And so I found National Autism Association conference, which was held in Florida. So perks there, coming from Ohio in November. And it was started originally by two moms who had kids on the spectrum and just was trying to build community and help and resources for people like them. And they were from Rhode Island, which, I grew up in Massachusetts, right across there. So I was like, hey, this all seems perfect. And turns out a lot of the doctors who at the time they used to call them biomedical, but really it's just functional medicine doctors that kind of focused on the autism community, but we didn't have that label back then. And as I sat there, these were doctors that they had been, neurosurgeons or PCPs for years, endocrinologists, like all kinds of all over the place on the medical community, doctors that had been, had practices for 20 plus years, directors of different hospital stuff. Like, I mean, these were credentialed, smart, well-respected doctors that left what they had originally been doing and dabbled into the autism community and really trying to find research and answers and information because there wasn't any 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And they did so because their own child or like their niece, like somebody very direct and close to them developed autism. Most of them, they regressed into autism, most of the kids in their lives at this point. And they were just like, this is ridiculous. How do we not have answers? How have we had all these trainings? How have I been in practice all these years? And now all of a sudden I'm seeing all this stuff. And so the first main thing, and if you have a child with autism, I cannot tell you enough how much I would like beg you to do this. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it's a pain in the butt. Yes, the kid's going to push back. Gluten-free diet, limiting sugars and food dyes, which thankfully now that's going to become easier because it won't be allowed in the food anymore. But even just the gluten-free, back then they really focused on the dairy-free. I think that's still because it's the gluten and the casein, and it's just the receptors of the brain, and it's it attaches to the wrong part of the receptors, and then it blocks the rest of like the blood flow, oxygen, and things like that to get across the blood barrier in the brain. Um, and then now we know so much more about why gluten and leaky gut and why,
Yep.
all of that affects them as well. So the number one thing for sure was immediately taking her gluten free. And then originally she was the only one in my family that I did that for, but then I had the other kids tested and all three of them did come back with sensitivities to gluten. And then at the time, my third child, Joelle, actually came back with the full blown allergy. So this wasn't the ELISA test. So it wasn't officially a celiac diagnosis, but it was like the food allergy. And gluten came back as a 4 for her. So and at the time, she actually was the one that would have had the least amount of
Yeah.
symptoms. Um, and it made a huge impact for Isaac, who ended up later on being diagnosed with ADHD. And we were able to manage that without any medication or anything like that. And now he's, at a college student and just is successful and at a hard academic school. But yeah, and then the other thing that probably made the most impact was the oxygen chamber, hyperbaric oxygen
Hyperbaric.
chamber. And again, what you said about changing the family, like me and Isaac were probably the people that most predominantly, and I probably actually really helped him with his ADHD at the time, and we just didn't know either. But we did for about a year, about 25 to 30 hours a week of her in the oxygen chamber. Although at that time too, it was also a blessing in disguise because that was during the peak. Naomi, from when she was diagnosed at 3.5 until probably about 8, was exhausting. She, again, when people see her now and tell me how lucky I am, like this is a kid that I would try to seek out these special pajamas because she would take her pajamas off in the middle of the night. I found pajamas that like you zipper up the back and there's like extra specific material around the neck so she couldn't like stretch it out. And somehow this kid could still do that. And at least once every other week, she would smear poop like all over her room, which was carpeted. I mean, when I tell you like the things that this kid would do, I would be driving and again bought like special seatbelts to go on top of the car seatbelts. And then all of a sudden I look back and Naomi's like having a party in the back of the car while I'm driving in the middle of the highway. It's like, how the heck did you get out of this thing,
Yeah.
kid? Um, but yeah, the hyperbaric oxygen chamber made a huge difference for her as well. Behaviorally, it definitely helped her calm down, which they did say that besides the obvious of increasing oxygen to the brain, it actually can kill off candida.
Yeah. That's the big thing. It, goes after some of the, and especially some of the like E. coli and things like that in the gut, and just helps to rectify the dysbiosis in the gut.
Yeah, and then she there at the time there's so much that you could do, and what I would encourage parents is not to be overwhelmed by everything that you hear that you can do, but if you can change one thing at a time. And as you get used to the one change the next thing. Because even I, like, there are days that I'm like, man, I really could have done this. I really could have done that. But there were some parents that either, they had all the financial resources in the world, or it was their only child that had autism. They didn't work. And some of them, like, you can get really serious with measuring, vitamin levels of things, and like not eating nightshades, and you only eat polyphenols this time of day. I mean, like, and some of these kids, they lost their diagnosis, and that's great. For me, that wasn't feasible for many reasons at my life at that
Yeah.
point. So I focused on what I could. And every once in a while, especially when we still have some of the harder days with her, which very much still happens, sometimes I'm like, oh man, if only I had, but you can't do that. Um, but you can do, I would say it's still a fight. And it's hard. Like I said, Naomi just recently got a job, starting at the end of December, and just to help her be successful and get the resources and put things in place and hold people accountable to do things correctly, and supporting her through that has been so overwhelming and stressful for me. And it's just a different type of exhaustion. Like, I had a friend who just recently had an ESY meeting, and she's like, oh my gosh, I was exhausted. And it's like, it's this hour-long meeting, but unless you're a parent that has been in that situation, you can't understand how draining. In,
What
like,
is that? What is ESY?
it's the extended school year. So it's just like her trying to get the school district to support her son in the way that he needs to be supported. And the school district, they have their budgets and things like that. And it's just like, it is an exhausting thing. Like, even for me, like, for the past 2 months, it's been all these emails and phone calls to get her the support she
Yeah.
needs. Um, the other thing would be supplements. That's
Well, so let's
also,
review. So basically, um, the big three, gluten, food dyes, and sugar.
yeah, that until this
Now,
day, that's a thing
that's the
that
biggest
affects
ones.
Naomi for sure.
And when I was sort of first jumping in the picture, coming up on close to 10 years ago, the whenever and I would start to notice her behavior, and there would be days where she's good, and then there's days where she's just a little different. And when you're around somebody long enough, like a coworker or a family member, you sort of know, like, something's different today. And almost always we would ask her, Naomi, what did you eat? And then there would be some candy, or there would be some gluten thing that she got a hold of.
Yeah.
And so then we got to the point where we got her to recognize, and hopefully we'll do this later, hopefully with her, but like, if you just straight up ask her, like, Naomi, what do nerds do to your brain? And she'll go, makes me go crazy. Or you go, what does,
Nerds, the candy, not the people.
yeah, yeah, exactly. What does sugar do to your brain? And she goes, she'll literally say, it makes me go crazy. And that's how she feels inside. And obviously we all have our vices, and we all like certain things. We all like, whatever sweets or whatever particular foods, but it's like, you do just have to get these things out of their life. You cannot have it in the house. They will seek it out. You yourself have to be held accountable. It's vitally important for their health, because one little slip up and you're looking at a week of bad
Yeah.
behavior. Like
Which was
if
so
she has
hard.
if she ate candy around Halloween, got into one of the other kids' baskets, then we're looking at a week to 2 weeks of a downfall.
Yeah.
And so that was a huge thing. Um, the other thing too is, like, this sounds weird, but even like cycles of the moon, anybody that works with
Yeah.
special needs knows they always look at the lunar calendar. It's like around a full moon, for some reason, that just tugs at their psyche a little bit different, and they're going to behave odd. There will be a 2 or 3 day period where you're like, okay, Naomi, what did you get into? And then she's like, nothing, nothing. But then she's still behaving bad.
And
You're
then we
like,
pull up the calendar,
I'm
and
like,
sure enough, it's like, and for her, sometimes it's
it's
before the
before the
full moon,
moment.
but
Yeah.
sometimes it's after. It's like, oh yeah, it's a full moon in 2 days, or sometimes like, oh yeah, it was a full moon yesterday, so that makes sense.
Yeah, and this
Um,
sounds crazy, but then if you know anybody that works with special needs in schools or in therapy, they will tell you the same thing. They will follow the lunar calendar. It's
yeah.
just a weird situation. They man up around those days.
They're just really sensitive. Their bodies are just, I mean, it's kind of like, what they say about dogs, right? Like, dogs can tell when someone's about to have a seizure, or if they have cancer, and all this stuff. It's kind of like that with kids with autism. I used to always say this, and it's still accurate to this day. Like, Naomi has this weird connection with me. And so even if, like, outside I have this smile and I'm like, okay, like life's great. We're going to get through this. But like if internally I'm just like in turmoil, which it, ironically, like when I got divorced and was on my own at home, like that made such an impact. And there's data because her therapy centers like take data up the wazoo. So there's all this data that shows that her behavior incidents like dropped from like, I forget what it was. It was like 30 or 40 an hour down to like less than 10 an hour
Mhm.
within 3 months of me being, me being single at my house, because I was always like so emotionally wound up in this, unhealthy marriage situation and she could just kind of sense that. And so even today, it doesn't happen as often. So it's even more noticeable. Like on the days here and there where I'm overly stressed over a particular issue, like she and I tend to butt heads more because she just gets more on edge as well, even if I think I'm kind of like hiding that behavior. Um, so yeah, it just makes a huge, like all those sensitivity things. And
Yeah.
the other thing too, I think that made an impact for her more recently is one, because she's been home mostly with us and not, being in a different environment where she is being exposed to candy and
Yeah.
soda. She used to have Coke all the time.
Well, what's crazy though about it is that, like, the one point I wanted to make about sugar is that, like, to your liver and your gut, if you gave somebody, like a Butterfinger or something like that, or just sugar, like from a cake or something, it's like to the internal chemistry of your body, it's literally equivalent to alcohol. So it's like if you give them nerds or candy, sweet tarts or whatever, like it's basically like giving them like a shot of like,
Well,
tequila or something, and it's quite literally internally the same, and that will mess with their gut and it'll mess with everything and their brain function and all that in sort of the same way. And it's really important for parents to understand that it is processed in the exact same pathway as alcohol.
there was also studies done, probably around like 2013, 14 or so, that came out where for the kids with autism specifically, they did, wirings and all of that, and giving them sugar, it reacts in their brain in the same parts as cocaine would. So when you're sitting there and you're thinking like, "Oh, it's just so hard. You don't understand. Like he just wants to have a piece of candy or he just wants to have this cake."
What's
And
the
it's
harm in me giving this to
yeah,
them?
and it's not like we don't ever like not let her have those things, but it is very limited and controlled, and it's never like we don't ever let her have nerds. It would be like a Hershey's small piece of chocolate because it's not the food dye and sugar combined. The food dye for sure more than anything we avoid as much as possible. But it's like you wouldn't sit there and be like, "Oh, Johnny, here you go. Just have some cocaine because you're going to have a tantrum if you don't." Like you wouldn't say that, and you just have to like ingrain that into your head. Like
Yeah,
in my kid's body, this reacts the same as if I gave them cocaine. Like,
yeah.
would I give my kid cocaine? No. All right, then let me just suck it up and deal with this tantrum for the next 45 minutes. And the reality is, and I'm seeing this now actually with my grandmother with Alzheimer's as well, and going back to like permanence and things like that is hard. So sometimes with Naomi, it is just you pushing through because they'll get an idea in their head and they don't know, like, she will get anxious about doing something that she's done before, but she forgot or whatever. And it's easy to be like, oh, it's easier for all of us if I just don't force her to do this situation. Like recently, she wanted to go to the Michael Jackson concert. I asked her several times. She wanted to buy the tickets. She wanted to go. We had already gone to a couple concerts at House of Blues that she herself had also found and picked to
Michael
go.
Jackson tribute.
Tribute, yes, that's right. We did not see the ghost of, Michael Jackson. And, and she was so excited, and for, like, a month, she's talking about this concert. We've already been to concerts at House of Blues. This just happened in December, and then, like, the day that we were going, she all of a sudden was freaking out, and her behavior was escalated, and she kept going back and forth, like, "Okay, yay, I'm excited to go to the concert," and then she was, like, freaking out. And finally, I just like put my foot down. I'm like, this is what we're doing. And it would have been so much easier to just be like, fine, Naomi, just stay home. It was like $25 for the tickets. It's not worth, the
Yeah.
stress. But I was like, no, because once you allow that to happen one time, then the next time it feeds into their thought pattern. And when the anxiety hits the next time, they're just going to remember that they were so anxious and didn't go that one time. And it creates this bigger monster in their head than what it is. But because we pushed through it, she went to the concert and she had a grand old
Yeah, and
time.
she has a reference point that, "Oh, wait, you're right. Like, I did do that
Right.
concert,
And
and
it's
I remember
okay.
that, and it was fun." And, it's just like you just have to, like, let them know they're safe, you're gonna be fine, like, we're here for you. Um, and that's and like you said, like, it's a lot of it is about how you're doing yourself. Like, if you're in a good state of mind, she really very well latches onto that and responds well
Yeah.
to that. And so parents, it's important for you, and again, it's important for everybody to pass along this episode to somebody that that works with kids with autism or has family members in this situation. It's like your internal chemistry, your internal psyche. Like, are you calm waters? Are you able to weather these rough storms? And if you are, and you have a very specific agenda with them, then they will respond better. But like even with me, like jumping into the picture and not having this experience so much with her, it would be so much harder for me to manage Naomi. Like, for instance, if I was on my own with her and just like, whatever, just kind of watching her for the day, it's like it was always so much harder because I was in a panic mode because I didn't really know how to respond to some of her behaviors. And she would, sort of like
Sense that.
sense
She
that.
can sense it.
So it's really important that your internal psyche, you get yourself good internally, and then you stay committed to whatever you want to happen, and then they'll follow suit.
It's worth the battles. The other thing that we changed for her too was going organic as much as possible in the last like 18 months, and that's made a huge difference. And then the
Yeah.
other thing is just, like what we just touched upon as far as like very good therapists, early intervention is huge, but also just continued intervention because, as we mentioned, like Naomi started therapy right away at 3.5 and she made this huge gain. She got her speech back. It's not, you can tell when she talks to you, it's not normal, typical speech, but she can very clearly communicate a lot of things. Sometimes receiving information can be a little more difficult for her, especially like non-tangible concepts, more conceptual things can be a little bit more difficult, but she's come such a long way with that. But a lot of it is just like pushing through the situations. I'm surprised that you mentioned the Jaguar story because I don't even remember that for Christmas. Because what I remember mostly the first time of your interaction with Naomi was our first family trip to Myrtle Beach. Which at that point, like you had been hanging out with the kids for a while, but that was the first time that we were just like, boom, like it's just us. This is what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, oh my gosh, he's going to break up with me after this trip, like that's it. Cause it was just bad. And we couldn't do anything. I couldn't participate in anything with anybody because she was just so overwhelmed at this resort. And I constantly had to just be with her, and you and the other kids would go off and do fun things. And I just kept missing out until the very last day where we found Lulu's and she got to play in the sand. And then like the next, like that was our second to last night. And then the next, like the end of the trip turned around a little bit. But then like we went back to Myrtle Beach with her, a couple more times. And then the third time she like saw this movie theater at the boardwalk it wasn't a real movie theater. It was like one of those Ripley's like funky thingies. And we don't even remember seeing this theater, but she like had this theater in her head and she had it that she was going to make a movie there, which at the time her speech wasn't as clear as it is today. Like she couldn't verbalize things as well as she can today. So we weren't even understanding 100% what she wanted to do with this theater. And I remember we went and all of a sudden she grabs like 25 stuffed animals of hers that she had to bring. And we're like, oh, this isn't
she was
going to
very
happen.
particular about it.
And then Naomi had this massive meltdown
right
outside
in the
of
middle
this theater.
it was right in the middle of the strip
on the boardwalk.
At in Myrtle Beach.
And she's bigger at this
night.
point.
It was at night. It was about 8:00.
It's so busy at the strip.
So busy. And she had this insane meltdown. And so much to the point where we had to hold her down. And then essentially we had to call the cops.
Yeah, the police had to come to help and get us out of there.
She would have wrecked stores. She was she was absolutely like a maniac.
And this was only like 5-6 years ago. But you know what we did the next summer?
We went
back to Myrtle Beach. And that's what I mean. It's like, when parents sit there and they're like, you're so lucky because she'll go here. It's like, no, like we've had all these issues.
But it took 1 year of us almost like every other day talking about that experience, talking about Myrtle Beach next year. What are we going to do? And we're just prepping her mentally for that. But also it helped a little bit in our favor because if she went manic again, then we can be like, Naomi, do you want to get taken away by the cops again? Because that really jarred her. That really got her. And it was more that the cops took her away more because we wanted them to, because she was not going to calm down with us just trying to hold her back. And she was running into stores, wrecking stores, knocking off shelves. She was literally going crazy. And so we just needed that intervention, and that intervention like woke her up like, oh my gosh. And she really did calm down the rest of that trip. But we used that as a platform to sort of speak upon later. Like if you go crazy again, like the cops will come get you. And then that literally will happen because she has hit us. She has bit us. she's done, physical things. And so sometimes we have to do that. But it's like, well, so there was that crazy experience, but I want to make sure we hit, before we get Naomi on the episode, I want to make sure we hit the supplements. So let's touch on that real quick.
So a lot of kids with autism, again, their bodies just don't function the same. I have the MTHFR mutation in my DNA lineup. I'm willing to bet so does Naomi. It's very well known in the functional medicine / biomedical community. A lot of these kids, their methylation processes aren't good. Their bodies just don't detox the way that ours do. Like Naomi is almost never sick. Like all of us just had the stomach bug really badly at our house. It started off with one kid on Friday, and it literally went through everybody, one by one, except Naomi. And that's because her body just lets the viruses sit there or the bacteria sit there. It doesn't push it out, because the symptoms that we see when we're sick, like that's because your body's trying to get rid of that, the bacteria.
Yeah.
And so their bodies just don't do that well. And you really need to support it. Most of these kids have extremely low vitamin D. So that's really important. We do that a lot for her.
Yeah, and it's a decent
support.
amount. So she'll take roughly 10,000 IU a day.
Yeah. Omega 3s, just again for the brain function. And again, it's a lot more than what the typical dosage is. We usually give her 4 instead of the 2 of the really big ones. I don't know what
So usually an average dose of fish oils would be about 2 grams per day for adults, and she takes about 4 grams, so that goes up. So vitamin D is really high in terms of intake. Fish oil is really high, and then I think the other big one is magnesium, right?
Yeah, the magnesium is really important. When she was first diagnosed, the other thing that I think made a big difference for her too was I used to give her vitamin B12 shots. And did that for about a year. And I think that made a huge difference. So now she does vitamin B complex orally. So that's a big one for her as well. And then, what else did you just say? The one, oh, magnesium. I used to actually do a magnesium lotion on her legs. And some of this was because at the time she couldn't swallow pills.
Yeah, that's one point I wanted to make.
And she was, like this girl, like, I don't know what, she must've been like a hound dog, part hound dog. Cause like, I remember again, Amanda that used to help out, and there was this like fish oil supplement that was a little cream and it tasted like orange. And at the time she used to have orange juice all the time. And Amanda said that she would, like, before Naomi even walked into the therapy center, she would squeeze it into her sippy cup and then put the sippy cup back into the cupboard, and then wait for Naomi to come in and wait for Naomi to initiate and ask for her orange juice. And then, they would have Naomi direct them as part of her therapy stuff. And so they were doing everything as if, like, from Naomi's perspective, the cup had been in the cupboard, whatever. And she's like, and it was those old school sippy cups that had all these stoppers and plastic and all of this. And she'd put the orange juice in and then just hand it to Naomi. And she's like, Naomi would literally look at the cup and not even sip it and then be like, no. And then like not drink it. And then she started to like think it was just like Amanda thought it was like a funny little thing. And so she's like, so a couple times she's like, I did the same exact thing and didn't put it in there, and she would drink it.
Yeah.
Like she somehow knew from the smell. It was just weird. So I used to try to find different ways to get her stuff, but now she takes pills like a champ. She's amazing at it. So
there are ways if you have a child, or a child that just doesn't take pills, or they're too young or something like that. There's lotions, there's gummies, there's all sorts of things. And
Nordic Naturals has good gummies that don't have additional sugar.
Naturals.
A lot of the gummy vitamins that you're going to find at your Target or you're ordering through Amazon, their sugar content is terrible. The quality and like the purity of the vitamin itself is terrible. So Nordic Naturals, that does the omegas, that's a great brand for the kiddos that have a lot of different options that are not pills that taste decent. Mariah takes them and she likes them just fine. And it's low or no sugar for those, which is really important.
Yeah. So what do you say?
Let's have Naomi join us.
All right. Hang tight. Okay. Here we are back with the famous Naomi.
What do you say, Nay?
Hello.
And
do you see the camera over there, Nay? You can look at the camera too.
So her outfit right now, she totally picked this. We're going to go to the playground later, so she picked her sunglasses. Nay, what were you telling us earlier? You said you are what?
Autism.
Do you know what that means, Nay?
Hmm?
What does it mean that you have autism? What does that mean? Do you know?
You're being awesome.
You are awesome. I'm glad that you know that. What else does it mean? Do you know?
Hmm.
What happens sometimes with your brain?
I think
A little bit different?
different.
Yeah. What are some things you like to do, Nay?
Do lots of things.
Like what?
Dancing,
Okay.
soccer, basketball. Not being very lonely.
Yeah, you're not very lonely, honey. You have lots of friends.
Yes, but I need someone,
What do you mean?
like a boyfriend.
Oh, hey, love on the
She-
spectrum. We're going to try to get her on there, I think. This
She's,
is her big goal right now.
She is an 18-year-old girl, so
What's one of the new things you started to do, Nay, that you go on Mondays and Tuesdays?
When I do exercise.
Yeah, Nay started doing Buddy Strong with CrossFit Soul. And that's one of the things where the first time she went, she did not want to go. And it was a battle for me and pushing through and having to kind of put my foot down and working through some behaviors. And I had to be there the whole time for the first session. And ever since that first session, she loves to go. She,
why do you like it so much?
When I be stronger.
Yeah, you are very strong. And then what else do you do on the weekend? What did you do yesterday?
Where
Well,
work.
you worked, but what else did you do before work?
I rode horses.
You rode a horse?
Yes.
What's the horse's name?
Mariah.
No.
Mariah.
Mariah is. Don't twist that so much. Thank you.
So I'm very proud of myself.
Oh, I'm glad you are proud of yourself. About for what?
How I'm awesome.
Yeah. Can you tell people about your Instagram?
How I get when I make lots of Instagrams and saw photos.
So her Instagram is Awesome Naomi, which is AUSOME Naomi. So
So
you want to
like-
follow her and get some fun behind the scenes look of her life. She does all her own posts and stories. It's fantastic.
So, Nate, what happens if you eat sugar?
You make your brain crazy.
Does nerds do that too?
Yes.
So, what does that mean? What would make your brain go crazy? We don't know what that means. Can you-
Having too much sugar.
yeah,
How
but
does it make you feel?
Crazy. Upset.
yeah.
Makes you feel upset.
And then, do you feel like you're on green or red when that happens?
Red.
So we use the regulation zone colors. So green is good, nice and calm. And then red is when she's worked up and not able to control herself very well. Nate, what's some other things that you want to do? Future Naomi wants to work towards
A house.
a house. Before a house, what do you want to do?
Go to Orlando.
What else do you keep asking to do?
Go to Japan. And work at Target.
Oh, big job. You want to work at Target?
Yes.
To move up in the corporate ladder from Outback to Target?
Yes.
Why Target?
So I could go on the cashier.
Ooh, you want to work as a cashier.
This
I
is
didn't
news
know
to me.
that. Now, where's somewhere else that you want to go that Isaac got to go that you want to do? So, Nay, what is something else you want to try to do soon?
Go to Kent State College.
Nice. And what do you want to do there?
Watch players play basketball.
Ooh.
Oh, you want to go to the basketball game?
And what are some things you have to work on to be able to do that, to go to Kent State?
Do hard work.
Mm-hmm. What else is something mom keeps telling you have to focus on doing?
Math.
Now that you're 18, what do you have to work on and think about?
Working at Target. Outback.
You have to behave like,
An adult.
and what does that mean sometimes?
Behave like adults do.
Which means what sometimes?
Don't get upset.
Yeah, we have to work on not getting upset, right? And staying in control, staying on green.
Yes.
Anything else you want to share, Nay?
That's it.
That's it. Can you look at the camera and say bye to everybody?
Bye-bye, everybody.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us for a great episode of the
close.
case. And here we go.
Case closed.
The case is closed and Naomi is out. All right. And again, it's important. She
So
just dips like that.
and that's how it is. When Naomi's done, she's done. But just to reiterate,
Just
I think
charges out of the studio.
again, like you see this, and I'm sure a lot of parents out there with autism, I know your journey. I know even if your kids are older, that this might hurt your heart because maybe you don't think that this is your kid, that he could be able to do that. And I just would share with you to stay encouraged. Um, you know, one thing at a time. If you can just pursue one new thing to interject into your journey at a time, that will make such a difference. I was crying the other day, happy tears, thinking about what Naomi's week looks like, as she mentioned, between dance and soccer and basketball and CrossFit and youth group,
Horseback riding.
because I remember a day, that doesn't seem like it was that long ago, that I didn't think my child would be able to do any of that she was not going to be able to, really experience life. There was a time where we were having a really hard time getting her to do anything that was not in her own agenda, being a part of family trips, things like that. And here we are today. And as Leo touched upon, for her 18th birthday, she chose to go to the Dominican Republic. And then because I took Isaac on his 18th birthday to Coco Bongo, like she chose to want to do that as well. And her and I ended up on the main stage at one point. Just a lot. But even though we did that for her birthday, then, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, we were in Columbus and we had this whole trip that was just Naomi's agenda. And we were at Build-A-Bear and she wanted to make 2 bears instead of 1. And I told her, no, we're only doing 1. And she couldn't receive that and process that. And then she decided she was going to spend her own money to get the second bear, which was fine. And I gave her that as an option. But then that stressed her out because she has this inner battle of, well, I'm trying to save my money because I want to do these big trips with it. But then she really wanted the second bear. And then next thing you know, I'm with my niece and nephew who are 8 and 5, and then our toddler who's 3.5, and then I have Naomi. And we're at Grader's ice cream place trying to take a picture. And she's just having this inner battle with herself because she spent this money that apparently she didn't really want to spend and nobody forced her to. And then next thing you know, she has this major meltdown in the middle of Graders. And, this big, as you saw, she's an adult, jumping up and down and screaming, and everybody starts looking at us. The kid starts to cry because it just literally came out of nowhere. They were all like lined up for a picture smiling, and then all of a sudden she spazzed. And that was just 2 weeks ago. So I just want to encourage parents, like, stay encouraged. It's a lot of steps back, and inching forward. But I would highly, highly, touch back upon the, going gluten-free, being able to, eliminate the sugar and food dyes as much as you can. Like Naomi literally only has sugar treats like that, like around special holidays and days. Clean up the environment right away. I did away with all the fake scents, and I used to love the Bath and Body Works wallflowers and air fresheners and candles. And, our laundry just smells like nothing all the time. It
Mhm.
doesn't have that fresh, laundry smell to it, things like that. But that, I think, has made a big impact. Early intervention, good therapists around you, and then just being willing to push the fight.
Yeah.
Don't succumb to where they're at. Be able to see where they can go. And I'm so thankful for all the people around us that could see that as well. And like we said, we push through the tantrums in the middle of Myrtle Beach and we go back. We push through these tantrums in the middle of Grader's ice cream and we go back. And that, because then you create, as Leo touched upon, the positive, because these kids remember everything. And even if they can't verbalize it to you, like
They remember it.
there are things that Naomi brings up to me now from when she was 5 and 6, when she wasn't really communicating, that she remembers and she talks about. And so even if you can just say, like, hey, I know this is stressing you out right now, but remember that time when you were worried about doing this new thing and then we did it and you had such a good time and you had so much fun. Like, just being able to have those reference points. And the more that you push through the negative things, you'll be able to create more of those reference points, and the more you can keep bumping your journey along. And
Yeah.
I think that's just so important.
And we'll obviously we have our socials sort of on the screen here, so feel free to reach out to us if you need an autism advocate, somebody to kind of help walk you through some of these prickly patterns along the way of just craziness of dealing with school boards and dealing with funding and dealing with fighting for your child and lifestyle changes and just whatever. And we plan to kind of have this topic on again next year for Autism Awareness Month and all that, and just something that we'll kind of keep in our regular repertoire for the Mind Body Marathon. And Samua herself will be releasing a show, the Samua Bry Show,
Coming up. The Brian Samua Show.
Brian Samua Show. So that will feature a lot of the input that she will have from her lifestyle changes and battles with Naomi as well. So thanks again for watching the episode and listening to the episode. And again, feel free to share it with anybody that you might know that is dealing with a lot of these same situations. All the best. Thank you. Dr. Leo here. Be sure to check out my new book, Faster Without Fail, Your Guide to Overcoming Injuries and Running Faster Than Ever. It is now available on Amazon. You could read reviews on the Amazon. You can check out what other people have said about it. But basically, if you want to revolutionize your running form and better understand how to stay injury-free within the sport, this is your guide. Feel free to reach out and let us know what you think of the book. I would love to hear your feedback. But again, please check it out on Amazon. Faster Without Fail. Appreciate it. Dr. Leo here. If you want to catch me in another setting, be sure to check out my YouTube page, Running Rehab, where you will find exercises on how to stay healthy with running, how to improve your running form, and a bunch of other tips and tricks on how to get over common injuries.